nobody knows. I didn't know what is this virus all about, and I was working right up until when the government said it's a shutdown. So for me, and then you start having people sending email into work like we will close until further notice and all of that, and then you start to listen more to the news to get a kind of feedback of how even the doctors, when they come on, they try to tune in as much as possible to get information, because remember, this thing is blind. We don't know this thing, so any information that really relates to the virus, I would really tune into it, me and the kids. So that's basically it. And like wash hands, that was always a thing for us. But like stay in your own little bubble. That was a thing that we were most concerned of, trying to stay away from other people, because you can't see this thing that is going around really. So yeah. We go off on the 23rd as the government lockdown. We go off on the 23rd, and we stayed. Most days we were home. Then I popped out 1 or 2 times just to see if things were, like the buildings and the bins and stuff. And I popped out, I think I come to the studio once. I think that was only Thursday in April, and I didn't come back until June. So, it affects work tremendously, yes. And, but apart from that, we were locked down like for 5 weeks straight. For the kids, they never have nothing like this, so they were saying, even the small one, we can't go out, we can't see no one can come to our house, we can't go out really. It was just we in our own little space, trying to make the most of it really. No. I think we just, over time the kids get bored, just to sit around, do nothing really. The TV was just mostly coronavirus on it. It was nothing new. And because I want to see the TV and hear the news really, it was just, like the TV was just on constantly. On this coronavirus thing. So we have to deal with that mentally, like this is where we at and stuff. We try to adapt, like going to the supermarket, the long lines. We try, that was a new thing for us. Going to the supermarket and the long queues, early morning, tried to get out there as early as possible, line up for about an hour to get in. So that was a kind of new thing for us, to get stuff. And when we have to go out, the kids will say, oh, not again, but yeah, like that. I was just home, just trying to make myself, doing any little thing in and around the house that I never get done. We try to have a little family moment where we bake together. Try to just have a mental stable, really. Get the kids them involved in the kitchen. more because I'm not going to work and stuff. And for that coronavirus, we have a few hot days where we sit at the back as well together. So yeah, the weather. I think the weather helped when it was that time as well. So they could go out in the back, not go out, but just go around the back and stuff. Yeah. Well, for me, I look on it differently. I wouldn't go in. I wouldn't work and eat. Normally, I would take a break and eat, or sometimes I just work straight through if I'm busy on a Friday. And I wouldn't eat between. I would just wait and take a break that I can wash my hands properly and do things differently. You would buy a cup of tea, and and every time you ever so sip some and that, I cut that out. When I'm on break, I just take my break and eat there and then. It lets you carry no antibacterial this and that, and yeah, it have a different perspective on where you touch. Try to remember that you were on the train. When you get off, you have to do your hands. If you use your card, remember to wipe, and those little bits that you never normally think of. Then you'd have to try and remember, like, yes. I'm saying that, like, when you use your card, say, for instance, you touch the pedestrian crossing with everybody touching it. When you reach to a point, you have to remember to do your hands. Sometimes, when you're in the street, sometimes you're not conscious that you did touch somewhere. And then even your face, then you put your hands in your face. That's something you have to be constant. Okay, I did that earlier. Yeah. For me, I'm okay. The world has changed. You can't get an appointment at the doctor. You can't get, no doctor want to see you. And so, frustrating points come in at times. You don't have coronavirus, but when you ring up, I don't know if you have that, but when you ring up to book to see someone, it's not possible to go to the dentist. I have my filling drop out, and I was told I'm not an emergency. So I don't know. So frustrating bits do come in. Frustration do come in. At times, yeah. No, that's it.
Wow. Okay. um. Wow. Okay. So it's good to reflect. I guess like my initial like experience with it was somewhat kind of like, I kind of didn't really believe it was happening. It was sort of like sitting in the office and being like, oh, there's this news story that sort of keeps popping up, and being like, oh, it's just like flu. Oh, we're all gonna get it. It'll be fine. And then I got ill. Like I got a sore throat, and I was working in the office at the time, and I suddenly had this feeling of like, oh my god, I've got it. And that's when the whole sort of like reality kind of dawns on me. Like, this is, we were already sort of like being told to wash hands and things, and I was like, oh, okay, yeah, washing hands, sure. And then I just was like, oh my god, no, I've got to stay at home, I've got to isolate, I'm ill. And then, so I did, I stayed at home, I had some time off work, and then I didn't know if I had it or not. There was no way to get tested. It was just like this kind of, oh, I've got a sore throat and a fever, maybe it's coronavirus. And I guess that's when it kind of, the sort of the real reality of the situation kind of kicked in. And then another like instance was me and my brother and sister were due to travel to Copenhagen for my brother's 30th, and we were just talking about it on the phone, like, oh, should we go? Should we go? Don't know. The gig's still on. We're going to go to this gig, and like, oh, let's keep it in our diaries. And then the day before we were going to go, we were all kind of like still talking, and then the gig was cancelled because there was like going to be a gathering of more than 1,000 people, and like we were suddenly like, oh, this shit's getting real again. So we all decided not to go. So I was going to travel by train across Europe from London to Copenhagen, and I basically cancelled the trip. I actually did get a refund for it, which was pretty amazing because it was before all of the all of the regulations and lockdown really came in. And then we cancelled the trip, and then again that was like, oh god, now that made me really like angry. I was just like, I've just cancelled a really great plan. What the hell? Is this virus even a big deal? Like, what the fuck? Like, isn't it just an overreaction? Like, what's going on? We cancelled the trip, and then that was like, and then the office closed shortly afterwards, and then it was like working from home. And if I'm honest, that was really great because I'm a creative. I work, as a designer, and actually working in my own space in a quiet sort of like environment really works for me rather than an open plan office. So I was kind of like, oh great, I get to work from home. This is like an absolute dream. But that was obviously also like kind of tainted by the kind of like constant anxiety really. Like I spent quite a lot of time being very concerned about my dad, who's over 70 and lives on the Welsh borders, and like other members of my family being kind of like, my parents, my mum and my stepdad live in France, my sister is in Iceland, my brother is also on the Welsh border, so everyone was kind of far away, and I was like, I went into kind of big sister mode and wanted to make sure they were all like following the right protocols, and like everyone was okay, and like, my dad had food deliveries, and it was quite a lot of work actually, that whole beginning, just like, checking that the people that you love were like, well, for me it was like, checking the people that I love were like sorted and safe, and then that meant that I could then just, settle into whatever the lockdown was going to be for me. So so that was that really. And then like I also found myself having really strange sort of like, I don't know, like sort of psychosomatic symptoms. Like I think because of the pervasiveness of like the news stories and like this kind of growing uncertainty about just like what was happening, and like the horrible situation in Italy, people being very paranoid and scared, and then what's going to happen in the UK, we don't know, and that literally everyone looking at different articles on health, like is it going to be, how long does it stay on a surface? Like, can you catch it from air particles? And it was just a bit bonkers. I find all of that very overwhelming, because I like to delve into things and feel like I know what's going on. I think we all do, right? Control the virus. Just understand the virus. So trying to figure out, how much danger I was in, how much danger my family were in, and then trying to put in safety measures for my family first and then me. And then just watching it, I remember just lockdown, not being able to work, actually, surprisingly, because I was looking forward to working from home, but actually really struggling to focus, and just sort of lying on the sofa being what's going on, and staring at news stories being well, how many deaths, oh shit, and just being kind of part of the news cycle, but being quite passive in that. And watching the deaths grow and grow, and then these awful daily briefings from whichever member of the Tory party has been wheeled out to speak in front of the press that day. And this kind of and then the next day there would be another Tory party member in the news being oh no, well, you can only go out to to exercise for half an hour and once a day. And I was that's nothing to do with the science. That is absolutely nothing to do with the science of the transmission of this virus. It's literally just to do with them, exerting a sort of power and control thing. And they were sort of Tory agenda going on. And I think that's just, and then just watching the death rate just slowly go up, and that horrendous herd immunity thing at the beginning, which was kind of when they said herd immunity, I was kind of really, is that a thing? Maybe we are all going to get it and we will all become immune, it'll be fine. And then it was no. lots of people are going to die, and they're going to evade any responsibility. So I spent quite a long time suddenly just going into this kind of quite deep kind of anger at the government. Just I am so angry with these entitled politicians who are just being wheeled out to talk to the public. Everyone's just in varying levels of uncertainty about what's actually going on, and you've just got they're just giving too much information and nothing clear. And I was pretty good with the social distancing. I actually went into kind of proper lockdown for, I think it was about 6 weeks, 3 to 6 weeks anyway, where I didn't come closer than 2. Oh, actually no, that's not entirely true. I did follow what I would consider as the Netherlands briefing, which was basically find someone that you can partner with, because I live on my own and I'm single, so find a friend that you can partner with so you can actually have some kind of physical contact in that time. So I did that, which was breaking the rules, but I assessed it and thought that was great, and it was actually much better for me on an emotional and mental health level as well. So that's okay. Interesting. Yeah, I think, it was just that sense of being isolated, actually, just being isolated and kind of glued to the newsreel, on a phone, checking the Guardian for live updates. And I actually decided not to do that after a while, because I was finding myself being too glued to the phone. But it was this kind of detachment, and I think well, it was just like there was like the fear that it was going to happen to your loved ones and like to my loved ones and me, like, and then there was this kind of this like, oh, this thing's going on and there's like red headlines everywhere, and that, you know, I can't be, you know, I can't go closer than 2 meters to anyone. I mean, I spent like going outdoors was quite strange because it was like going to the shops. It was just like the levels of stress were unbelievable. It was like, oh my god, I've come into like closer than 2 meters. I'm just, you know, and there was at one point where I actually had to just let go of that and just think, do you know what? I'm not sure because I'm not in a high risk category. You know, I could spend my time being really stressed out at other people and like outdoors. I'm being like, oh my god, they came a bit too close. But then actually I was just like, oh god, I can't, you know, that stress was the worst thing, really. But yeah, the unreality was like, being sort of isolated and basically perceiving the world through, even more so through a screen, just was really, really difficult at that time. Well, and kind of really shone a light for me on like how, you know, we're so glued into like social media and the news reel, and then I actually I had to cut myself off from it because it was causing me so much stress. Actually, it was, you know, and I actually just had to then engage much more with my immediate environment, so just like resort to the localism and like talking to people near me rather than like engage. I stopped using Facebook. I deactivated my account, just like couldn't deal with it. Well, I live on a boat, so I was part of a small like neighbourly mutual aid group who and we would just kind of look out for each other, and then we had some socially distant choir singing, so we would sort of get together and sit in a circle and sing, which was really nice. There were other mutual aid groups that I knew of, but I didn't personally get involved with them, partly because I was working full time, so I actually didn't have a lot of time to go out and do that. Yep. Yeah, the social distancing choir was amazing. It was like, we very tentatively approached it as a project. This is a group of boaters, so a lot of us live in our own little isolated kind of, boats. We live on our own. And then we kind of made this decision to have a choir, and we all got together and sat at socially distanced in a circle. And it was amazing. Like, I don't think I've experienced such, like, the first time it's just such sort of camaraderie, really. Like, we just all got together and sort of belted out various different songs, not very well. And different people led us through different songs, which was great. And then we decided to meet every week. So we met every week after that, and it was just a really lovely thing. It built a bit of community around where we were. Like, on the boats, we tend to move every 2 weeks, but obviously during the lockdown they stopped us moving. So it was actually quite nice. Like, normally we're a very transitory community, but we actually could stop and get to know each other and sing together. And we had this, it was Beltane, so on the 1st of May, we had an amazing, like, quite sort of moving fire sort of ritual, actually. We lit a fire and then all stood around it at social distance, and then kind of did a really sort of strange and interesting, like, kind of ceremony where we burnt our past regrets and welcomed in things for the future and leapt over this fire, which was amazing. And we all did it basically in silence, and it was just like this level of community that we built together that was something quite different to the way that you engage with your neighbours normally. So yeah, it was really, really special actually. It was really nice.
confess I didn't take it particularly seriously. So I carried on into work, and I got something that may or may not have been COVID it must have been mid-February, and having to isolate with symptoms. It ran through our house. I think all of us had symptoms, and the problem I have with it is that I don't currently know whether I've had it or not. I don't know, and that ignorance is a distress, because we simply don't know whether we've got the protection, or the potential protection of antibodies or not. So I mean that's been a thread of concern for me. But having gone into lockdown a bit early, I think by the time I was due to come back to work, we'd gone out on full lockdown and everybody was sent home. The type of job I do means that I've worked from home solidly. I've not had the inconvenience of being furloughed, or the risk, touch wood, to my job. There doesn't appear to be any concern with my job at the moment, but I've actually got busier, if anything else, as work. I've had to adjust, and I've been capable of adjusting to working from home. Indeed, it's probably changed how we operate forever now. So in terms of my experiences being locked indoors, having to utilise what we had, worrying for chiefly for our parents. So my dad, he has health concerns, and he's had similar health. He's had pneumonia a few years ago, so we've been absolutely petrified about him getting it, to the point that we have really walked around on eggshells with him, and he's the type of person that can't bear that type of behaviour. So for him, he would prefer to just carry on as normal. So there's been that as well. In terms of other impacts, perhaps not necessarily on me, but on the kids. My eldest is affected in terms of his GCSEs. That's caused a particular level of grief, I have to say, because it seems that his mocks will be the way in which they judge his GCSE. I know there's more to it, but as is typical with kids, I think they set the mocks in a way to try and scare them into behaving properly and revising properly for their exams, and I think that's probably backfired, because we're now worried about what type of grades you'll get, having previously been coming up with prospective grades that were very high. Now obviously we're looking at grades that are based around mocks that he clearly didn't apply himself to, so we have that particular consideration as well. That's not so much me, that's the others. My wife's a teacher as well, so she's had different issues to worry about in terms of work, and she teaches at the same school as two of my daughters, so she has had to balance being a teacher with being a parent in those circumstances. She's had quite a unique perspective, seeing how her school operates from both directions in this crisis, and I have to say the schools have done pretty well, I think. Albeit it's affected the kids in different ways. One of my daughters has thrived in it, the other one has had to work really hard. She really liked the structure of school, and being able to sit at home, not have someone standing over her, it seems, has led her to get quite a long way behind in terms of her work. So it's thrown up things that if you'd asked me what I thought the problems would be at the beginning, they've not been what they've turned out to be. For example, in terms of money, I seem to be saving a fortune. I'm saving an absolute fortune in terms of money, in terms of travel, and not having to eat lunch in central London, and kids not being able to spend money. It's financially, it's been quite positive, which it just seems really odd, really curious. Sorry, Joe, you've got a question coming. my government, well, it's... Yeah, I do. I mean, the problem is you don't know how fair they are, because you know my politics. You know they come from they lean quite strongly to the left. So I'm naturally critical of any Tory government. But when they seem to, the arch concern for me is the funneling of people with known symptoms and confirmed what's the term I'm looking for? Well, I suppose confirmed presence of COVID in people, and then being funneled into to help the care for the elderly, the healthcare sector that's dealing with the elderly is just literally pushing a gun into that environment and expecting it not to go off if people are playing with it. It's that for me is an utter disgrace. And even if you look at this from if you look at it and you're not taking it seriously, and clearly Johnson is going to, the fact that he was prepared to dismiss matters, as far as we can tell, not turning up to meetings. So the first 5 Cobra meetings he didn't turn up to. The fact that he was, contrary to advice, as I recall, shaking hands with people known to have the illness, and shake lots of people at the same time's hands. It's, I mean, it shows a level of disregard for that. But he can only be guided by the information he has at the time, and that will only come out in an inquiry. The current posturing by this government would appear to suggest that an inquiry is coming and they're mindful of it. The lack of apology. I don't expect him to come out and accept responsibility for 60,000 deaths, but he can come out and say, well, we did this, we sent people into care homes and it was incorrect, we shouldn't have done that. I mean, it just seems that everyone knows that's correct. Why he can't admit it, I can only assume is for legal reasons, or that they anticipate an inquiry is coming. And if an inquiry is coming and they know they're going to be at fault, that really is the only explanation for some of the behaviour that seems to be exhibited on a daily basis. So the decision to put people with known symptoms into that environment really is utterly appalling. It really is utterly appalling. You imagine that they are the most vulnerable people in society as it is, and that is the generation, or the people in that group are among all the generation that's left that dealt with or had to put up with World War II and the period in the 50s where this country recovered from World War II. And the way we thank them is to not only treat a pandemic of which they are the most vulnerable, most prone to not only contracting it, but to having the most significant symptoms and risk of death, but to actively tip the problem into areas where they're residing. It is just an absolute disgrace. We will look back at this period and we will be utterly ashamed. The government are there to represent us. Parliament is there to represent us. It will be something that I say we because the government is there representing the country. Parliament is there representing the country. We've elected them. Now, I personally didn't vote for Boris, but I voted in that election. We as an electorate are culpable for the people we put in charge of this country. And when we voted for Boris and for his parliament, we knew what we were getting. People that voted for him were clear because he seems to have this sort of Teflon, this Teflon surface where nothing sticks to him. Nothing. I mean, I'm sure you have it from other people. The catalogue of dishonesty and reprehensible conduct that my day job is. If he were accused of this in any regulatory proceeding, he would be struck off. If I had one of my I can't and won't say what profession I'm currently regulating, but if I had one of my members accused and dismissed for dishonesty in a public newspaper, they would be struck off or removed from membership. And yet what this country did was vote him in. That's just for one instance, let alone everything else that you can attribute to it. And you know, I think he's on the record as accepting that he's been examined in public, certainly, about his dismissal from, was it the Telegraph, his sacking by Michael Howard. These are accepted elements of dishonesty that he would be dismissed for in any regulatory proceedings, and yet we put him into a job that he doesn't seem to be capable of doing. So, as an electorate, as a nation, we're as culpable as this Tory government. We really are, and we will be utterly ashamed when we come back. The concept of herd immunity and the idea of tipping these known infections into the care home community is something that we, the electorate, the Parliament and the government will be utterly ashamed of and won't be able to justify. Haircuts, Jay, were an absolute well, I'm just going to tone my language down. They were a nightmare. The state of my hair, Jay, was just. I've basically shaved most of it off now because it was intolerable. But if you imagine Chrissy Waddle back in the 80s, balding, curly, it was just awful. So in the end, I've had to shave it off, and it doesn't look too bad, Jay. Sorry, Jay. It was. If I assume that this enterprise doesn't have any pictures, and I could send you the most horrific picture of my hair that my brother took, because he revelled. He absolutely revelled in how horrific my hair went. And you would probably disown me as a friend, Jay. But other than that, the moments. I suppose in terms of nice moments, I mean, coming together at work. I started a new job back in February, and we've had to come together. It's been an unusual set of circumstances, but I think it's probably been good for camaraderie in that regard. We've all become more familiar with Zoom, you and I, we haven't kept in touch for years properly, but I think we've kept in touch more in the last 3 months with others that have, we haven't. So that's been nice, encouraging that, and obviously mocking our former lead singer is always good fun. I mean that's good fun whether we're COVID or not. But yeah, there's been no sort of screaming hilarity. It's just been getting on with it. I suppose that's one of the problems with it, is it's stuck indoors looking at 4 walls, and the limit of what you can get out and do is get out and do some shopping or go for a walk around the block with the kids. I suppose it's sort of leveled things out. Thankfully, we haven't had when I talk about leveling things out emotionally, we haven't had the lows of anybody close to us really suffering with it. But I suppose we've been robbed of the highs as well. I mean, the cricket season's just starting up. You know how much I love that. So we got the kids out training yesterday, which was nice to see them doing some exercise. But it's just been boring, Jay, really, isn't it? That's what it is. It's been emotionally very stable, other than, unless you've been sort of personally affected by it. You see the misery on the TV, but thankfully it's not, and perhaps that's the benefit of living in suburban London, is sort of out of the way of it, really. Is that it?
Okay. You're going to ask me the questions. Well, basically, it was the news was out that there was a coronavirus going around, and we all had to be careful. You see, I was still at work, and as you know, as a health inspector, I was almost like frontline, and we were awaiting information from the Public Health England, who coordinate measures to control this. You see, but while I was there, this was going back to March now, and I was actually at work. My normal duties. Remember, March it rained almost every day, and I was doing inspections for licensing gambling places. And because it was raining, a lot of people were stuck inside, and premises I was visiting were generally overcrowded with people. And every time I got in there was just lots of people. And I think the week I was there, it was Cheltenham week, you see, so there was extra punters in them, So I started feeling a bit like a runny nose, like what a flu would look like, you see, in slight being unwell, So I self-isolated because that was the advice. And I checked my temperature at home, and it was gone like touching 38 degrees, which is like already paraxial, you see, fever. So I stayed away from work. I actually went to work on the 16th and 17th because I had a meeting with somebody already pre-arranged. So I couldn't cancel, you see, but I knew that I shouldn't be there because I was already I didn't have a sneeze, just like a runny nose and dry cough, So I came home, self-isolated myself. And then the first symptoms I had, which was not very well known then, in fact nobody knew, was a loss of sense of smell and taste. I just immediately lost the sense of taste. I couldn't tell the difference between tea and coffee and things like that. And with that, I lost my sense of appetite, I didn't feel like eating anything. So I rapidly lost weight. And because I was self-isolating, I told my friends not to call around or come around, anything like that. And because they knew I was not well, people were bringing food, you see, but I just couldn't eat. I didn't eat anything at all, and my fridge just filled up with uneaten food, you see, takeaways, etc., And then, you got a question? I said, did you have a question? You were trying to interject somewhere. No? Anyway, so I just give you a time frame. This was like the 23rd of March, and then we're going on to 24th, and people kept phoning me, and there were about 5 friends who were particularly concerned about my fading health, you see, so they kept phoning, which was helpful, but at the same time quite disruptive because the phones were just going non-stop. And I have a good friend in Mauritius, and he was particularly concerned, so he informed a few people around here, including social services and one of his friends who lives near me, you see. And finally, cut a long story short, around the 23rd, a friend, he phoned the ambulance and said, you better go and have a look at this man, he's not very well. So about 8 in the evening, ambulance crew turned up, and they were very good. There were 2 ladies, and they took my temperature, and they said, you okay at the moment? I said, yes, I'm all right. I don't want to go to hospital. And then the next 3 days, I just went downhill. I became quite disorientated. I didn't open the curtains. I didn't know what time of the day it was. And I think that's where, you see, my friends again got concerned. And by Thursday, I think it's the 26th of March,